Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar from TaiwanTextiles.com. Today we're going to focus on Europe, a new strategy for the European textile and apparel industry. The European Union is the world's second largest producer, as well as the world's largest import market for textile and apparel. Beyond that, we all know Europe is leading the way in terms of advanced manufacturing as well as environmental regulations. Today, we're honored to have Mr. Dirk Vantyghem with us. He is the Director General of EURATEX. He is the key person to move EURATEX forward and promote the competitiveness, sustainability, and innovation of the European textile and apparel industry. He will provide some information about the new EU strategies, specifically on what the European Union is doing to develop its long-term competitiveness. He will then have the Q&A session hosted by Huang, the president of the Taiwan Textile Federation. And so we hope this webinar will generate more exchange and cooperation between Taiwan and Europe, and be really helpful for future business strategies. So, let's get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join the series of webinars organized by the Taiwan Textile Federation. My name is Dirk Vantyghem. I am the Director General of EURATEX, which is the European Apparel and Textile Federation, based in Brussels, Belgium. Our role as EURATEX is to promote and represent the interests of the European textile and clothing industry at the level of the European Union, European institutions, but also globally, worldwide. I'm very happy to join the webinar, and I will share with you some insights into latest trends and developments of the European textile and apparel industry, and how an organization like EURATEX is developing a new strategy towards those trends. Let me share a few slides with you, please. Before we go into latest developments and strategies, let me share with all of you some key figures about European textiles and apparel industry. We're talking today about an economy, a sector of approximately 160,000 companies based across 27 member states of the European Union, which together generate a turnover of over 160 billion euros. Our employment is about 1.5 million workers operating in the industry, and our exports is around 61 billion euro per year. A few, let's say, typical characteristics of the European textile and apparel industry that you can see, that you can follow on the screen. Our industry is obviously a very globalized sector, and I think you will all know that, with complex supply chains. That obviously has an importance, has an impact on our work here at EURATEX. It's a very diverse ecosystem. When we talk about textiles and apparel, as you know, it covers a very wide range of end products in the apparel and clothing industry, but also in technical textiles, industrial applications, cars, airplanes, etc. That makes it a very attractive, interesting, dynamic industry. It's an industry very much dominated by small and medium-sized companies. Many people do not realize the importance of SMEs in our industry. It is close to 99% of our sector. The competitiveness of European textile and apparel companies is very much based on quality and innovation. It's quite clear on the global market, Europe cannot compete on the basis of price, so we focus very much on innovation and quality. The textile industry has an important sustainability and circular challenge, and I will come back to that later in my presentation when talking about our strategy. But we also have a labor force challenge. We have an important aging workforce that we need to address as an industry. A few more figures to illustrate the variety of the European textile and clothing industry, which is largely organized in two segments: the clothing on the one hand and the textiles on the other hand. And you can see on the screen that it's more or less a 50-50 division here in Europe between both segments. Maybe emphasize that looking over the last 10 years, the technical textiles, industrial and technical textiles, is a segment that is rapidly growing here in Europe. Let me focus a little bit on the global dimension, on the trade relations of the European Union with the rest of the world. First of all, I would like to emphasize that European Union, is the second most important exporter of textile and clothing after China. So our companies, our SMEs, are doing pretty well, are quite competitive. Actually, 38% of our global turnover generated by European companies, textile and clothing companies, is being sold on global markets. And SMEs account for more than 50% of that total export value. So it's not just the larger companies, the larger European companies that are successful on global markets, but also many textile and clothing small business have become increasingly successful on global markets. When looking at those markets, very quickly, a snapshot of what are the main clients, what are the main export destinations for European textile and clothing products. The UK is number one. As you may remember, the UK is no longer a member of the European Union. So from our perspective, this is now considered an export market, an important one. Other countries: Switzerland, United States, China, Russia, Turkey, etc. In terms of suppliers, so what are the most important import destination or countries where we are sourcing textile and clothing from? Obviously, China is by far the number one. With 36% of the European import, they play a very important role in our trade relations on textile and clothing. Bangladesh comes as an important second one with 17%, and also Turkey with 14% is an important supplier for European textile and clothing. Let us now focus a little bit more on our relations with Taiwan. On the screen, you can see the trade development over the last 10 years, both with regards to imports and exports from an European perspective, obviously. So as you can see on the screen, our imports from Taiwan have been pretty much steady over the last 10 years, around 400 million euro per year of imports from Taiwan, which ranks Taiwan in the 24th place in terms of partner countries for the European Union. Our exports has steadily grown, has slightly grown over the last few years, and is now reaching 250 million euro per year, which ranks Taiwan on the 30th place in terms of export destinations. You can see, therefore, that the European Union has a trade deficit with Taiwan, but at the same time, our exports to Taiwan has been increasing slightly over the last few years. You can also see that on the following slide, which has a lot of information, but it's basically highlighting that Taiwan, along with a number of other Asian countries, relations with the European Union, our trade balance has slightly improved, but at the same time we continue to have, as I mentioned before, a significant trade deficit. I will stop here in terms of numbers, facts and figures about European textile and clothing industry. If all your participants would like to access more detailed information on a subsector level within the textile, within the apparel industry, I do recommend to go to the EURATEX website, and there you will find far more detailed reports on trade figures, on the macroeconomic indicators, facts and figures of the European textile and clothing industry. What I would like to do now, secondly, after this short resume, short overview of the industry, is to focus a little bit on COVID-19, on the impact of the corona crisis on the European textile and clothing industry. I could pick different charts and different statistics, but I just show this one, which is the development of the turnover from textile and clothing in 2020, last year. And I think the chart speaks for itself. We have a very significant drop, up to 30, almost 40% of turnover in the second quarter of last year. There has been some pickup, there has been some partial recovery in the third and more recently the last quarter of 2020. But overall, it's clear that the COVID-19 has a devastating impact on the European textile and clothing industry, as it had on the textile and clothing industry worldwide. We made an estimate at EURATEX and believe that the loss of turnover for 2020 could go up to 50 billion euro for the year 2020. Sharing a few more figures to illustrate the impact of the crisis, you can see the drop in the retail sales for the textile and clothing industry, again reaching almost minus 50% in the second quarter of 2020. So certainly in the apparel industry, the shops that were closed, locked down, this has had a tremendous impact on the industry. When you look at the employment, there the figures are less dramatic in the sense that we are facing, of last year in 2020, we have witnessed a drop of 3, 4, 5% of employment in the textile and clothing industry. And that is mainly because at European level, but also at the level of individual member states, there have been important support measures which helped companies to maintain their employment throughout the crisis. The big question will be what will happen today, at the beginning of 2021, if and when these support measures are being stopped. We fear that there will be a dramatic drop in employment in our industry and in many other industries when these support measures are coming to an end. This next slide is a different perspective showing how the textile industry has been hit even more or even worse than some other sectors of the economy. This is a projection from the European Commission based on confidence expressed by entrepreneurs. So this is about the personal perception and opinion from entrepreneurs. And you can see that the textile industry, which is the red graphic, is particularly pessimistic. It's more pessimistic than the retail industry, electronics, construction sector. Only the tourism industry on this graphic, the tourism industry has been even more pessimistic than the textile industry. And that is confirmed in the next graphic, which is showing the business confidence in the European textile and clothing industry over the last few years. And you can see again at the end of the slide of the graphic, in April 2020, there has been a dramatic drop in confidence, even bigger than we faced the financial crisis in 2009. What we have seen more recently, the last few months, is that in the textile industry, there has been a recovery of confidence, whereas in the clothing industry, the pessimistic mood remains very, very strong. So in short, in a nutshell, the impact of COVID-19 on the textile industry here in Europe has been very strong. certainly in the clothing industry. In the textile industry, we have seen in the last few months some recovery, but overall this is a crisis that demands a policy response. What we as EURATEX have been doing on behalf of the industry is to discuss with the European authorities what kind of recovery measures should be put on the table. So what can we do, what can policymakers do to safeguard the industry from this dramatic impact, where we have developed a number of proposals, both in the short term and the long term. For the sake of this presentation, I will not go into all the details, but it's about access to liquidity. Many textile and clothing companies have limited cash reserves, so access to finance is an important short-term measure. It's of course about stimulating demand, so make sure that the shops can be reopened. It's about public procurement. It's about making sure that the supply chains are restored, are no longer disrupted. And it's also making sure that we avoid adding regulatory burden on companies, on SMEs, adding new regulations, new measures which complicate the operation of the entrepreneur even more. In the long term, what we've been negotiating at EURATEX is a strategic recognition of the textile and clothing sector here in Europe. And I'll come back to that in a second. Actually, what we have been pleading for is a new EU textile strategy, a new kind of blueprint on which we can develop a long-term competitive model for the European textiles and clothing industry. A model that is based on 4 key pillars. 1, sustainability and circularity. 2, focus on innovation and digitalisation. 3, invest in skills and startups in the textile and clothing industry. And 4th, improve market functioning, market access. Let me share a few words on each of those 4 pillars of this new EU textile strategy. The first one is about sustainability and circular strategy. At European level, the new European Commission, the new European government, if you want, is putting a very, very strong focus on what is called the European Green Deal. It is the leitmotif, it is the number 1 policy priority to decarbonize the industry, to increase sustainability, reduce the environmental impact, to be sustainable, and at the same time remain competitive. This European Green Deal has a lot of initiatives and legislation which is being developed as we speak. One of them is to develop a so-called Circular Economy Action Plan. In that Circular Economy Action Plan, the European textile sector is a prime target. So we have been challenged, invited by the European authorities to think about circularity in our textile industry. How can we increase, how can we develop a successful and realistic business model that embraces circularity? At the level of EURATEX, we have developed a detailed circular strategy. There is no time to go into all the details, but it's a strategy that is built on dialogue with entrepreneurs, considering latest developments in research and innovation, and it's based on partnership. Because if you want to develop circularity in the textile industry, we need partnership. On this slide, you can see 12 key points that we have included, which we have included in our circular strategy. Beyond the partnerships, it's looking into the cost of circular textiles, it's looking into product design, it's addressing consumer behavior, it's developing life cycle assessments, it's setting new standards for circular textiles. It's about the whole collecting and sorting challenge. It's about green public procurement, etc., etc. This is an ambitious circular strategy, which we are currently implementing together with the European Union and our member enterprises here in Europe. Apart from circularity and sustainability, it is clear that European textile and clothing want to invest more into innovation and digitalisation. Also here we have a number of initiatives and instruments. One of them is the European Technology Platform, which is a dedicated platform focusing or promoting innovation within the textile industry. We are running specific programs helping SMEs to embrace smart textiles and innovation. And we are discussing, again, with the European Commission, how we can accelerate the digital agenda into the European textile and clothing industry. Thirdly, in the area of skills and entrepreneurship, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, the European textile and clothing industry has a challenge here. A challenge of an aging workforce and a challenge of attracting young generation, young skilled people into our sector. To address those challenges, we are currently negotiating with the European Union what is called a Pact for Skills. So we are trying to identify what are the key critical skills needed in the textile and clothing sector of tomorrow. What is being offered today by training institutes, vocational training schools in the textiles industry, and what needs to be changed in this regard. We have a program running, which is the Skills Smart project, which is addressing to some extent that challenge. But we are looking forward in the next 6 to 12 months for a more ambitious program that will address the skills shortage in our industry, and that will promote entrepreneurship in Europe. We basically lack sufficient entrepreneurs, young starters who want to engage, who want to invest in the textile and clothing industry, and that is something we are working on at the level of EURATEX. Finally, our fourth pillar of our strategy is obviously to look at markets. As I said before, the European textile and clothing industry has been increasingly successful on global markets, with nearly 40% of our turnover being exported outside the European Union. So we have an ambitious trade agenda, which includes a number of elements. First and foremost is, of course, to promote free trade, free but also fair trade. So making sure that all our partners and competitors around the globe operate on the same basis, respecting the same rules. That is important for the so-called level playing field. Right now, here in Brussels, we have a strong focus on market access in the UK, following the unfortunate Brexit saga, I would say, but also US, Mercosur, where we have a free trade agreement under negotiation, and many other markets as well, where we want to promote access for European companies into third markets. We have what is called the PEM Convention, which is facilitating or integrating the supply chain for the textile and clothing industry within the larger European area, so including Southeast Europe, but also Northern African countries. So try to intensify supply chains within this, what we call pan-Euromed region. This is a priority for us. Our companies are concerned with more effective market surveillance. That is to say, to make sure that every product that is entering the European Union internal market is complying with all the regulations, whether it's related to chemical, technical standards. So again, that we ensure fair competition between European producers and colleagues, competitors from around the world. We are working on specific dossiers, the GSP, the Generalized System of Preference, so preferential trade relations with developing countries in third markets. We have an important discussion on due diligence, so the responsibility of European entrepreneurs towards compliance with environmental and social standards. It's an important discussion here in Brussels at the level of the European Union, the European Parliament. What will be the responsibility, the liability of entrepreneurs with regard to due diligence? And of course, market enforcement. We want to make sure that our European companies, again, can access, can enter third markets in an open, transparent and effective way. These are some of the points of our trade agenda. There is more to that. But again, in general terms, our effort is to make sure that European companies can access third markets, at the same time allow textile and clothing companies from third markets to enter the European Union and enter it on the basis of free and fair competition. This is a snapshot of, let's say, the latest developments as regards the European textile and clothing industry, with focus on the strategies at European level. I hope this provides you with some interesting, useful insight and can inspire some of your authorities also to develop similar policies and strategies. Thank you very much.
I have to thank you very much for you to giving us the trends and the strategies of European textile and apparel industries. Let's us learn a lot from you. Now this is a question answer session.
Okay.
We'll start now.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah. In the terms of sustainability and circularity, recycling and reuse are common challenges for all kinds of textile products. And it is necessary to develop recycling solutions with technical feasibility and economical efficiency. Now we would like to know, is there any opportunity to develop more cooperation or exchange programs between Taiwan and Europe in this field? I would like to take your comments.
Thank you for the question, Justin. You are right. Recycling textile waste is a challenge, also here in Europe. And I can tell you, speaking for EURATEX, we are actually working quite intensively on that challenge as part of the recovery plan that we have submitted to the European Union, the European Commission. One of our, what we call flagship projects, is to build recycling hubs for textiles across Europe. Very ambitious plan to actually build physical recycling facilities, because we realize that in Europe, there is simply not enough capacity, industrial capacity, to recycle all the textile waste. Bearing in mind that by the year 2025, so tomorrow, if you want, there will be a compulsory, obligatory collection of textile waste in Europe.
Oh.
So that will dramatically increase, I would say explode, the volume of textile waste that needs to be handled. So we have a capacity problem, and therefore one of the proposals that we put on the table is to create, in fact, a network of recycling hubs across Europe, partly incorporating existing recycling facilities and partly building up new capacity. It's a very ambitious plan, And in developing the plan, you talked about the challenges. I can only confirm that there are indeed many questions to be solved when developing a recycling kind of strategy. There are technical questions. It's about logistics. You know, how do you ship textile waste across, in our case, Europe? Of course, there is a very important economic aspect. So the cost of recycling. So there's many challenges that we are addressing in what we call a kind of a feasibility study, which is being developed. And of course, let's say we all agree that textile recycling ideally has to be organized close to the markets. So where the textile is being consumed or produced. So I think what our strategy is certainly to avoid that Europe would be exporting its textile waste as it used to do, and really find a local solution. So when you speak about cooperation with Taiwan, I think we can certainly share some of that, how to say, know-how and experience that we are currently developing. It's not about obviously shipping textile waste across, between Taiwan and Europe, but the know-how, the logistical, technological questions, we can certainly try to share some of the experience as we are developing it in the coming months and I think years. Thank you.
I remember last century, around the year 1992, Germany, they developed this collection system for the waste electronics. And the system was developed very well. And the implementation of this process also everywhere in Germany. And many of these wasted electronics parts and components, they were collected and sent back to some specialized factories to redevelop to different materials. So I think Europe has leading experiences in this recycling or collection systems. Concerning textile and clothing, now we are relying very much about the European experience and also your legal systems. Where you locate the collection place, and how people going to make the categories about what is the cotton waste, what is the polyester wasted. So
exactly,
we're relying on the systems. And for your information, Taiwan now, we are one of the largest producers of the PET bottle recycled fibers in the world. And many leading brands around the world, for example, Adidas in Germany, Nike in the US, they are always sourcing this recycled polyester textiles from Taiwan. So I think on one hand, we are playing the role of supplier. On the other hand, Europe playing the role of how to manage the systems and recycling the systems. So I hope in the near future, we'll have some concrete projects that we can work with the EURATEX.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. That sounds interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Secondly, is regarding the innovation and digitalization about European technology platform, as you mentioned in your presentation, ETP. Are there any chance or opportunities for Taiwanese textile mills or clothing manufacturers to participate in this commercialization of these research results? In particular, the area of intelligence and high performance materials.
Of course, in the ETP, the platform, the technology platform, is for us, for EURATEX, a very important vehicle to promote innovation in the European textile industry. Of course, it serves primarily the European industry. I mean, that is what it's been designed for. That's the governance, if you want, the ownership of ETP lies with the European industry. So it's difficult to to see how directly, at least, Taiwanese researchers could get involved in ETP, because the ownership is European. But I would rather suggest, I think you have a similar institute, which is the Taiwan Textile Research Institute, if I'm not mistaken.
TTRI.
I would imagine, I don't know them in detail, to be honest, but if they have a similar mandate as ETP, what I could suggest is that there is some rapprochement, there is some cooperation at the level of the two institutes. They have a similar mandate. I think that is more appropriate rather than have directly Taiwanese researchers or companies involved directly in ETP. I think we should keep the ownership of the two institutes, European, Taiwanese, but let the two institutes maybe come closer together. To be honest, as you know, I'm relatively new in the world of textiles, so I don't know historically if there has been any let's say cooperation between ETP and TTRI, but if it's not the case, I would certainly recommend that for the future.
Well, also for your information, in Taiwan, around 3 years ago, there was an alliance about smart textiles. Alliance was initiated.
Okay.
So far, there are around 30 to 40 different companies from textile and electronic industries joined this alliance.
Okay.
And we have some concrete projects successfully developed for the healthcare systems in therapy hospital. And the solution was introduced to a Chinese national hospital in East China. And it was well developed, and also the electronic company, in my opinion, the electronic companies, they are more interested, more enthusiastic in this field than textile mills. So I think in the future, if there is an opportunity, we would like to introduce this Smart Textile Alliance, these companies in this alliance, to meet with your partners in ETP. Mm-hmm. Maybe they may find some opportunities for them, each others.
Yeah, that sounds interesting because as you say, Justin, I mean, smart textiles is certainly an important, let's say, element in the future development of also European textiles. And as you suggest, maybe there is more enthusiasm on the technology provider than on the textile providers. And that's why with ETP, we are developing, or we are implementing a project which is called SmartX, which is promoting exactly smart textiles. So if you can again connect with this alliance, we will happily look into that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, we will try to make it a success in the future.
Very good.
Coming to the third questions. Well, the European textile and apparel industries has suffered, I learned from your presentation, has suffered from the pandemic than other industries. Maybe tourist industry is getting worse. But furthermore, the textile and apparel industry is becoming less attractive to young talents, young people. And we will say there is a similar situation in Taiwan. Especially, the manufacturers in Taiwan, either it's government companies or it's textile mills, very lacking of young workforce to their manufacturing facility. So I would say that does EURATEX have any strategy to help the different countries, textile mills or clothing companies, to attract more young people to get into the industry? We would like to learn something from you.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting question, an interesting timing, because just later today, here in Brussels, we will have a meeting with Thierry Breton, who is the European Commissioner for Industry, to discuss specifically this problem, how to address let's say the labor market, the skills market in the textiles industry. So we will discuss with him together with our president. And what we will try to do at European level with the Commission is to develop what we call a pact for skills. Actually, it is a part of the European, let's say, strategy to address the skills problems in the textile and a few other industries. I must say there's a few industries that face similar challenges. So we will, or the European Commission would like to create like a pact, you know, an agreement from the EU with the industry. And we will again start the discussion later today. I think there are many aspects that needs to be addressed. One for sure is a problem or a challenge of perception of image of the industry. And again, to be honest, I don't know yet how the situation is in Taiwan, but in Europe. So as a textile industry, we need to develop campaigns, you know, image. We need to work on the communication, on our public relation to explain to the public, to the youngsters, that textile is not old and dirty, so to speak, but is innovative, is focusing on sustainability, where there is a lot of technology coming in, as we just said about smart textiles. So we need to develop, we need to work on the image. Some of our members have developed quite important campaigns. For example, in Germany, there was a campaign called Go Textiles, which is very much focusing on this, you know, image, showing examples of young people working in innovative textile companies. It's a small example, but we at EURATEX at European level are about to open an Instagram account, which is specifically to target the younger generation, because, you know, LinkedIn or Twitter, you know, is not, you don't reach the younger generation. So we are opening an Instagram account specifically to post and present, again, attractive, innovative stories about the industry. So working on the image, working on the perception is for sure important. And second, of course, I mean, this is the, let's say, the marketing side of things. Of course, we need to work on substance as well. And here, among many elements, we need to look into the educational programs. So what kind of curricula are we developing for the textile industry? Because we hear in Europe many entrepreneurs, CEOs complaining that the young generation do no longer have the skills, the technical skills necessary to run textile companies. So we need to cooperate with schools, universities. We need to develop vocational training programs and make sure that, again, the contents of the educational programs are up to date and match with the needs of the companies. So there is today a kind of a mismatch between what is being taught at school, at university, and what the companies in the textile industry need. So we need to have a dialogue there and adapt the contents of the education program. So there is a lot of work to be done, because as you said, also in Europe, it is one of the more critical challenges that we have. The workforce population in the textile industry is aging very quickly, and we need young, talented people who can bring innovation, who can bring new ideas into the industry. It's a priority.
In Taiwan, we imported labors from, for example, Philippines or Indonesia or Vietnam to help textile industries or garment industries to be supporting the manpowers for their workforce. But it's always not enough. But however, for some technical stuff like pattern makers or some textile technicians in dyeing companies or weaving mills. We have programs, that's the cooperative programs between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Particularly in the postgraduate schools, some textile engineering, they developed a program and let students to learn this process, this program. And after graduations, the industries are going to recruit the graduates. So it has developed around 8 years. And for Taiwan Textile Federation, we're also entrusted by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. And we help the garment makers, garment companies to recruit, to help them train some pattern makers for about half a year. And each of the trainee, after training process, we are responsible for introducing jobs for them in different garment manufacturers. In the last 10 years, we have developed around, we have trained around 300 pattern makers for the garment makers. And now they are working in Taiwan as well as in their overseas manufacturing factories in Cambodia or Vietnam. So in the future, maybe we'll discuss this more in some places, and we can share the information what we have been doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
And number 4 is concerning about sustainability. The European fashion industry is striving towards the sustainability. There are challenging issues like circular economy and microfiber pollution in the ocean, etc. How can textile industries strategize and respond to these issues in terms of their R&D and productions? Please, if you have any information would like to be shared.
That's I guess the $1 million question. But you're right. I mean, how to say, the industry is going through a fundamental transition, and the whole, of course, Corona crisis is accelerating this process. That we see very, very clear. So it's indeed very important, necessary to think about the strategy. What's the future vision? I can tell you at the European level, at the level of the European Union, we are working on a new EU textile strategy. And actually, the European Commission has took the initiative at the beginning of this year, so 2 months ago, to officially launch the process to adopt this a new EU textile strategy. So there will be an official, if you want, communication from the European government, if you want, towards the industry. And the idea is to try to understand and to identify what is the framework, what are the key pillars, for a future-proof, competitive textile industry. And of course, I mean, there's no simple answer on that. I can tell you from our perspective, from EURATEX perspective, sorry, it's 4 key pillars that we try to work on. The first one is, of course, the whole sustainability, as you mentioned. And there is, again, so much happening in Brussels, in Europe, under the EU Green Deal, so many initiatives that will dramatically change the way our industry is organized, is behaving. So sustainability and circularity must be an important pillar of that strategy. But also innovation, what we discussed before. We need to invest more in bring innovation into our industry, and help our companies who essentially are small, medium-sized companies here in Europe. We need to support them to invest into innovation and specifically digitalization. I think it's the same in Taiwan. There are many efficiency gains that can be developed through digitalization because of the typical supply chain, the complex, the lengthy supply chain that you have in textiles. We need to work on that. But again, for most small textile companies, digitalization is far away. It's costly. It's so we need to see how we can help financially through some grant schemes, to introduce digitalization in companies. Then, okay, of course, the skills that we discussed before is an important challenge as well. That needs to be addressed. And for us, for EURATEX, the fourth pillar of this competitiveness strategy, of course, is the market. I mean, that's the bottom line. And here, as you do, Justin, I'm sure from Taiwanese perspective, we follow very closely, how the world market is developing, how the regional agreements are being concluded, some tendencies to introduce protectionist measures, some supply chains are disrupted. So we need to make sure that open markets continue to prevail, market efficiency, market fairness, so that everybody complies with all the rules and regulations, the standards, chemical regulations. We need probably more and more, we need to think of establishing global rules, maybe at the level of WTO, to make sure that all the players in this very globalized textile industry operates, again, with the same rules, and obviously respect those rules, and that these rules are properly controlled. So having efficient, fair, open but fair markets is an important, let's say, pillar of our strategy. So these are some of the components that we try to develop at European level. And I would maybe add what is also, I think, and I speak as a relative newcomer in the industry, I think textile industry needs to reach out to, let's say, its wider ecosystem. I don't think we can solve our challenges just by ourselves. I mean, textiles is used in a very broader supply chain with the retailers for the apparel, a lot of industrial applications in the car industry, in the medical sector. I think as the textile industry, we need to establish agreements, cooperation, discussions, dialogue, whatever, with that bigger, wider ecosystem, and jointly identify solutions, develop new technologies, new applications. So maybe I'm wrong, but maybe in the past, textiles was looking very much inward. We need to look outward and to understand the importance of the textile industry across, the economy, across the society, and reach out to those stakeholders that work with textiles, that need textiles, and jointly develop, as I said, new developments, new solutions. So I'm basically pleading for a more kind of outward-looking, open-minded textile industry. I think that's in our interest. These are just some elements, Justin. Again, there's not a single magic, solution, to address all this, but at least these are some of the elements that we try to work on at the level of EURATEX.
Yeah, of course, sustainability and digitalization, multiple diversified problems or policies for each textile mills and companies, even for retailers. Okay, so yes, our industries are also making a great efforts to find or develop a sustainable solution for the manufacturing process. And on the other hand, for digitalizations, many of the companies in Taiwan, they have already invested, but the most important problem for them is how to recruit sufficient IT managers, IT engineers, as well as some cross-discipline professionals to understand the IT and also textiles. So this is the problem we are facing. I think it's not easy to solve, but we have to try everything we can to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, and learn from each other. Absolutely. Learn, take some lessons, good experiences, maybe bad experiences that can be very useful. Yeah.
Okay, let's going to the fifth and the last one. Okay. The government of Taiwan is promoting negotiations with the European Union for the signing of an economical cooperation agreement, we call the ECA. And based on our understanding, the European Parliament and the European Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan, they have already expressed their support. So in this case, Taiwan textiles export to the EU are not eligible for FTA, tariffs reductions. Whenever we talk about the FTA, free trade agreement, concerning Taiwan is always called forget Taiwan always, FTA. So what are your suggestions? Never forget Taiwan always, and for the Taiwanese textile and apparel industries, maybe to explore some connections or some opportunities, or develop some opportunities, or try to do something and make this ECA can be happening.
I'm of course not surprised to hear this support from the Parliament, from the European Chamber, who I know very well from my past. Actually, I used to work quite closely with them. Specifically in let's say focus on in the textile industry, as you know, Justin, Taiwan is doing relatively well when it comes to your export with the EU. We actually have if I'm not mistaken, as Europeans, we have a trade deficit. So you are performing better than we are in our exports to Taiwan. So my first reaction would be to say, what can we do to improve European performance towards Taiwan? Let's say, speaking in very general terms, as EURATEX, we are in favor of concluding agreements, whether it's free trade agreements or economic partnership agreements, investment agreements. We're in favor of concluding agreements with partner countries or regions where obviously we have a certain, let's say, an offensive interest, and that typically would be with the more advanced economies of this planet. So Taiwan, from that perspective, should certainly fit with that objective, because that's where, as you know very well, European textile and apparel is competing not on price, is competing on the basis of quality, of innovation, of design, and therefore our most important markets are the more advanced economies in the world. It's well, UK, of course, it's Switzerland, it's United States, is these kind of markets. So on that basis, some kind of agreement with Taiwan, between EU and Taiwan, would certainly make sense from our perspective. Of course, we all, very better than me, the politics, the complexities, the sensitivities of any kind of agreement for Taiwan. Your membership with WTO is difficult, is sensitive. So that is essentially a political question. But from an economic kind of business model perspective, I think it makes sense for the textile industry, again, based on the advanced state of development of the Taiwanese economy. That is something that we should look into and see what we can do, how to promote, how to facilitate.
Well, for the time being, we very much utilize the Vietnam as a milestone or a step to develop our European market. We export materials to Vietnam and manufactured over there and then re-export to European market. And this is also followed our clients to develop this trading models, Taiwan, Vietnam, Europe, because Vietnam, Europe, you have FTAs. But in the future, whether there is direct free trade agreement between Taiwan and Europe, as a consumer in Taiwan, maybe many Taiwanese as would be very much like me. Well, we all like Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Zegna, all the famous brands or even middle brands in Europe. It's quality and style and image and culture based. So
Exactly.
in case there is a direct free trade agreement that happened between Taiwan and Europe, our consumers in Taiwan, we can buy some more European luxury textile clothing without paying tax tariff rate. So that will be helpful and benefited to the European partners. So this is my opinion. Hope you can help deliver this message to those politicians.
I certainly look into that. And because what you just said, the current setup whereby you, from your perspective, you, as you said, you have to use Vietnam as a kind of as a gate, is not meant to be, because to be honest, for us, the EU-Vietnam agreement we can see is mainly benefiting the Vietnamese industry. Is not adding so much value for the European industry. So we are quite, let's say, critical on the impact of the EU-Vietnam free trade agreement, and we try to monitor closely. Again, there has to be obviously a win-win, and that is why, from our perspective, agreements again between Europe and advanced economies around the world, with the US, Canada, Taiwan, Japan, that is where we see the biggest interest from a European perspective, of course.
Time goes so fast. It's almost 40 minutes. I got some sign from my colleagues. It's about to the end of this question and answer sessions. Once again, Dirk, thank you very much for sharing us the information about European textile and apparel industries. And also, we hope we can develop some opportunities for making more exchange programs between Europe and Taiwan in the future. Thank you very much.
I'm certainly looking forward to that. Thank you, Justin, for the opportunity. I look forward to meet you in person as soon as Corona allows us to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.